Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Sophie, and today we're going to be going through how to join two lists together using the extend method. So getting straight into the video, we're going to start by creating a list, and we're going to do this in the same way we did last time. This time I'm going to create a list of integers from 1 to 6, and I'm going to keep them as integers and not as strings. Then printing my list. So here is our list of integers. What if I wanted to add the number 7 to this list? This is where the append method comes in. Rather than having to rewrite the whole list and say my list equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I don't want to have to do that every time. I might have a list that's say 100 elements and I can't rewrite that whole thing. And so I need a quicker method to add that extra number or that extra element into the list. So let's get rid of this because this is just going to take us too long. And let's try out the append method. We call the append method by writing the name of your list, in this case, my list. Then you use the dot. And if you remember in the last video, we used the name of your list dot index. And that was the way of calling the method index to find a specific item or element in the list. This time it's coming up as our top option here. We type in append. So we have my list dot append, and then in brackets we will put the item that we want to append to the list, add to the end of the list. And in this case I want to add 7, and I want to keep it as an integer because everything else in the list is an integer, and so we want to keep that nice and consistent. I run this line and it seems to have appended. So let's check our list again. And there we go, we have the number 7 on the end. Let's try again and see if we can append the number 8 to the list. My list dot append 8. My list. There we go, and we still have the 7 in there as well. So we have 7 and 8 added onto the list, and you can just keep on going with this for as long as you like. You might notice a slight trend here where every number is increasing by 1 as you go to the next element in the list. So how would I do this more automatically rather than having to manually put in the number each time? If I have such a long list that I don't know what the last number in the list is, I might just want to create a way of adding 1 to the last element in the list. So how would I go about doing that? To do that, I would create a variable, and I'm going to call it value. And this is a flashback to last week's video. How do you access the last item in a list? Have a think, maybe pause the video and then come back. If you gave that a go, then well done. If not, then we're going to go through that now. So we want to add 1 to the very last item in the list, and to do that we need to first access the last item in the list. If you watched last week's video, you might remember we did some work on indexing and accessing items in a list. So maybe pause here, see if you can remember how to access the last item in a list, and then come back to the video when you've had a go and we'll go through it together. Welcome back if you paused. If not, then no worries, we can go through this together now. So last time we found the last element in the list by using negative indexing. So to do this, we write the name of your list, square brackets and -1. And then because we want to add 1 to the last value in the list, we literally just put +1. So it's really, really simple. It's literally just the same way that we would write equations in real life. And we run this, print value, and this gives us 9, which is completely right. So how do we then add that to the list? Well, we use this append method again. My list dot append, and we put value in here. That seems to have run fine. So let's print out my list. And there we go, we have all of the numbers in the list as before, and now we have 9 in there too. We can actually go back and run this again. In fact, we have to rerun value because once you've done a calculation within a variable, it will save that in solid space. This no longer matters what the new item in my list is. What matters is that we saved value at a certain point in time when 8 was the final item in the list. And so this will actually still be, the value of this will still be 9. So let's run this again, and then we will get 10 because it will update my list based on what we've done down here. So run this again, there we go, we have 10. Append again, print my list, and we have a list from 1 to 10. This is just a more efficient way of appending the final item plus 1 in the list without having to go through and look at what the final item is yourself. Now that we've appended to a list, we can write down the syntax that we are using. So the general template for how you would add items to a list using append. So the general syntax to use when adding an item to a list is list name dot append curly brackets item to append. What if I want to add a string to my list? And remember, a string is a text item. Let's try appending a word. I'm going to append Python and then print out my list. And that is absolutely fine. You can add a string to a list of complete integers. What if I want to add a float, which, if you remember, a float is a floating point number, which means that it has a decimal place. And it doesn't actually have to have any numbers after the decimal place. It could literally be 1 point, and then you don't actually need to write anything else after that. So I want to add the number 5 as a float. That is a float, even though it's technically an integer number because it's a round number. By adding the dot, you're converting that into a float. Print my list. And there we go. It actually converts it to 5.0, so it knows that it is a float. I have an interesting question for you now. What do you think will happen if we try to append another list to our list? Do you think that we will end up with a longer list, which is all the elements in our original list here, plus all of the elements in our second list? Or is there something else that you think might happen? Maybe give it a try and then we'll go through it together. Okay, so I hope that you've given that a go. If not, then we'll try that out now. So we'll create a second list called my second list, original, and we're going to add some fruit again. You know, I like my bananas and peaches. This time, let's add some grapes in there. Okay, so we have our second list now, and let's try appending that to our first list. So, and we do that by my list dot append my second list. Let's try running it first, and that ran all fine. We have a green tick. Now let's print my list. Very interesting. So it's actually formatted slightly differently. So we've now got a vertical list, and it's actually kept our second list as a list within our list. So this is called a nested list or a list of lists. Not technically a list of lists because this is our only list within this and everything else is an individual item. But we can't combine two lists by using the append method. If we wanted to combine these two lists without this being a list within here, we would actually use another method called extend, and that's something I will go into in the next video. Something to try here is just indexing this final item so you can get this list back out again. So let's try just doing that. My list -1 because it's the last item in the list, because when we append it always goes to the end. This gives us our list back as well. So we could actually save this to a variable and still use this as its own individual list, or we could just use it as part of our bigger list. I'm going to stop the video there, and next time I'm gonna go into extending our lists and combining two lists together. And there's a couple of ways that we can do that, so do tune in. Look out for the next video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon.